Well, we're all doing what we've been given to do. And the type of person I am is, we all want peace in the world, but I have a particular drive for reconciliation and peace, and it took the form in my life of world religions, because I've traveled a great deal and majored in Hinduism at Sarah Lawrence under Joseph Campbell, been involved in Tibet with Buddhism and His Holiness, lived in Egypt, speak some Arabic, been in practically every country in the world. And then you realize everybody's the same. They're all wonderful people. And most people have pretty bad leaders. And then people judge other religious beings by perhaps their nation's flaws, but without knowing very much about them. So I've always loved the world of interfaith, and I've taught world religions and art history. Art history is really, if you think about it, it's just illustrated world mythology, world religions up until now. But I guess it's modern art is illustrating the mentality of today. And so anyway, that has been a pleasure and an honor to be given something like that to do, just as you've been given that. And the children's series I've been working on with a grant from Templeton, one of the volumes on charity really would explain what we end up doing in a certain sense. I mean, our attitude toward it. In all the faith traditions, we're asked to be humble. But I mean, if I said to you, be humble, how do you just be humble? Well, in this extraordinary work written in the late 1000s, it's pointed out that you and I didn't choose our parents, didn't give ourselves our skills, our place in time and space, our social status, our connections. We actually didn't give ourselves any of these things. So how dare we take credit? And really everything that you are, I am, our qualities, our drives, our interests, everything, all of that, and who we are in the world is on loan. It's just a trust. And so that trust can't help but come through. And when one's really doing one's true work, it's not coming from your egoic story, it's coming from your heart. It's coming from true man, or you can call it innate goodness, or the Buddha nature, or in Hebrew, Adama, or self, in Hinduism, Fitra, in Arabic, the primordial nature, the Christ nature. All these traditions refer to this presence where we are all one. I was thinking this morning about the other and all the interfaith movements in the world. And I was thinking to what degree I'm still othering everyone, even of other traditions. I've been in my whole life trying to bring them together, reconcile them. I do series on Judaism, spiritual affinities with Islam. I do Prince Rezi of Jordan with Dalai Lama doing Buddhism and Islam, or all the different traditions. And yet, sometimes when I think of someone of an other tradition, I go right into stereotype. And it's very hard to be 100% present. But there is nothing to do with human life except reach that place. That's what human life is for, to quit othering. That wonderful Richard Rohr, he's great. He who lives out in Albuquerque now with his Center of Contemplative Action. Neville and I visited him once, and he had a small gathering and there was one thing I took away. He said, when you meet the other, another person, there should be nothing there accept love. It's like even having you in my home right now. I'm honoring a human presence that's carrying the divine. It's like we're light bulbs. The bulb can go, but the light is there. And so Richard Rohr said the importance of not othering and to really, when we meet someone, just do it. Of course, you have to remember to do it. And that's what religious practices of different traditions help you to do. But we got on a plane and we had to go to Atlanta to change to get back to Louisville. And I was getting some tea at that crossroads where there's pizza and the worst of fast foods. And there was some people waddling toward the pizzas with baseball caps. And at first I thought, oh, yuck. And then I realized I had othered them, I had judged. And so I caught myself. And I opened my eyes and looked at those people with the caps and simply loved them. And all of a sudden, they started glowing. And all I can say is, whenever I remember to do this, oddly enough, I do it not so much in my life as I do it in airports, watching people. But you feel great because you're acting out of your real self. And look what happened with Merton on 4th and Chestnut, 4th and Walnut, 4th and Muhammad Ali. He looked at those people around Stewart's and saw them shining as the sun. Now, for example, most of us identify, it's all misidentification. Most of us identify with our egoic story. I'm Gray Henry, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, I publish books, blah, blah, right? And therefore, things that are happening, I'm judging through the mentality I've grown up with, my prejudices, the things I like and dislike. So I'm basically judging nearly every situation through a gray package, right? And I'm not acting from my heart. And that's it. How do we start remembering that there is no other, that we are all one essence, one glorious light together? And how do we quit misidentifying with the wrong self? Who are you really?
Yeah, who are you?
Well, the journey began right here. I've been in this house since I was in kindergarten. And the journey began when I was around 15. And some kids were in traffic accidents, maybe from drinking, and they died. And I couldn't believe, it's like if you're sitting with someone right now like you, and then, oh, you were just killed. Like, are you just gone? And, I'm a member of the Episcopal Church, which my father designed. And I love to go to church, and I never miss Sunday school. And their doctrines in all of the great faith traditions, that there is something more than just this state. But even though people were saying they believed in the resurrection of the body and life everlasting, I found people didn't believe that because it was not scientific, not provable. And so I became really curious about what happens to you when you die. And then even someone I was going out with when I was 20 died, a terrible accident. And I decided I would major in the world's religions. I wanted to find out what everyone said about death universally. One of the great books we've done is a compilation of the entire spiritual process from birth to death, in which we show every single idea, whether it's greed, envy, whatever, what everyone in all the faith traditions have said about that idea, whether it's Plato or Lao Tse or Shakespeare. And then you see that the world comes together on these things. So I started becoming interested, and I was barking up the wrong tree. I was barking up the tree of physical death. Where do you go? What happens after you die? Actually, we don't know, and the real subject is not that. That's not even within anything that our human mind, it's beyond the human categories. But it's the death that's called die before you die, which is key to every single faith tradition. Or I would say even in modern psychology, how do you knock down the ego that's self-interested, self-referential, boasting all the time? So then we decided the hippie thing, we were in the middle of fighting the people throwing napalm in Vietnam. It was a turbulent time, the end of the 60s. And so we got on a freighter and shipped out to Morocco in 1968 and arrived in Tangiers. We were with 8 people on a freighter, and we'd never seen anything like it in our life. Like, we're looking at the traditional life, the life of the Middle Ages of Christianity, with people, doing their 5 prayers a day like Christians used to do. Think of the paintings of Malay. The peasants would stop all day long at the different periods of the field. Here are people who are still doing that, right? So I was thinking about Holy Communion, and you don't go up to the altar if you're sort of full of hate and anger, but we say, Lord, have mercy upon me. Christ, have mercy upon me. Empty out. And then you go up to the altar and kneel, and you receive into that emptiness the bread and the wine, which I actually believe in transubstantiation. I don't believe it's symbolic, but that's the way I am. That's my kind of angle on things. You put into that the Christ nature, and suddenly, for that moment, you're kneeling there, you have regained who you really are. You're practicing who you really are with Holy Communion. Isn't it interesting the Catholics do it they go to Mass all the time. And then at that moment, if you look at some of the paintings in the Vatican with the altar, the chalice, the medium, the dove of the Holy Spirit, and the communion of saints, you, at that moment of regaining your pure nature, you return to the one. There is no death. You just that return. Morocco, we got a car. We bought a little Citroën van, and we set off. First, we went in Morocco all the way down the Drah Valley. We lived with Bedouins who had come to collect their dates from Timbuktu, lived in their tents with the, beautiful, humble people, Everywhere we went, the hospitality, we don't have that here, We'd never seen hospitality before. You go, and we reached Algeria, and our car broke in the desert, and the mechanic said, look, there's no place for you to stay. You all will stay with us. They made us sleep in their only bed. So I had never experienced Christianity before. Yeah, what we're told. If you walk around our city, can you tell the people are practicing Christianity? What's it look like? You go to the Islamic world, you see what Christianity looks like in action. So it was like, whoa, I'm finally seeing my own tradition awake, because I don't see it in a day-to-day experience with people here. But in the Islamic world, every other phrase they say is praise the Lord. And they say it for good and bad because they so trust that when a trial comes, even if they can't see that God has something for them, they know it in their hearts. But they're saying it all the time. If they praise somebody's something, they say a little prayer so they don't envy it. So there's something, it's continuous, the whole thing. So you're in a world where people are in the constant remembrance of trusting God, and they're always counseling each other. If someone is upset, they have a beautiful phrase to say from Scripture or something like this. So, and of course, just as Christians are supposed to be imitating Jesus, how he would do everything at every moment, it's the same with the Muslims and the Buddhists. These are Of course, the Prophet Muhammad is not considered to be anything more than a man. He just had it all together with no ego. But we were driving to across North Africa, and I became pregnant. And then we reached Libya, which had a king with a beard, that when he moved from town to town, they would say, "The king is coming, the king is coming." This is before Gaddafi destroyed. The Libyans are wonderful. So we reached a small town north of where that terrible flood just took away the people of Derna. We were up in the mountains above Cyrene in Beta. And so I delivered my daughter, Bedouins with tattoos. I didn't even speak English. Luckily, I just sat on a table in gravity. And so it was beautiful to be with traditional people. The women just sit around under a fig tree, everybody nursing their babies. I didn't speak any Arabic. And we met people, students from all over the world who were in this town studying, people from, Bosnia and Bangladesh and Nigeria. The Filipinos became our big pals. I'm totally into Filipino culture, cooking Filipino. And then later, we finally reached Egypt with a 2-month-old baby. And it was just as the 67 war with Israel was ending, so it was still bombs continued on a long time in Egypt. But my grandfather had been in Egypt for 27 years, from 25 to 52. He was a Rhodes Scholar to Oxford, where he became a judge and where he taught law. And my father and uncles and everybody grew up in England. My children went to the same schools as my grandchildren that my father did. And so once at Buckingham Palace, the American ambassador said, "Judge Henry, Europe, basically, each country is sending out 2 judges to be part of the Napoleonic courts of Egypt." Well, what was it really? Is that the Suez Canal was being put together, and the Europeans, we always want to grab people's stuff, so I'm sure they didn't want, if there was a dispute, to be judged under Egyptian law, which was Napoleonic. So Pops and Gammy lived in Alexandria for 27 years, right through the Second World War. And my grandmother read out loud to the blinded soldiers of Montgomery in the other room. I mean, even these lamps are from their house, and furniture in the other room, and all that brass is all from their house in Egypt. And so I grew up, when I was a little baby, all the letters that came to this house all had the stamps of King Fouad or King Farouk. And so then in 1952, it went from being a kingdom to a socialist republic. Gamal Abdel Nasser took over and threw out all the foreigners. It was terrible because he didn't care about culture, and the Russians came in. I cannot tell you, the libraries, all the great things established by the royal people were just trashed, Anyway, my grandfather, of course, all the foreigners were asked to leave. So my grandfather went to Baton Rouge. Why? America is on Anglo-Saxon law, except for one state, Louisiana. It's on French law. So my grandfather went there and started putting the Napoleonic Code into English and editing it for the modern world. And so finally, they came here and died here when I was in my 20s. So it was the most fabulous life, Cairo. It's London, Paris, horrible. Egypt, fun. Everybody from all over the world are there, and you have layers of civilization, not just the pharaonic and the early Christian. There's the Persian period, the Greeks, the Romans. You can't ever see Egypt, So we arrived there with a 2-month-old baby, virtually penniless. And my husband got a job with, first he taught filmmaking, film direction at Cairo University, and Spanish at another university. We needed money. And I taught English and art, because I didn't speak Arabic, at a little Egyptian school. But basically what we were learning from being among the Egyptians were manners. The people They always put the other person first. If you come to their house and they've just baked fresh chocolate chip cookies, they don't save it and give you the store-bought. Their first reaction, it's like the girl saying, is, my God, I've just made cookies, eat them all. And they're not faking it. They mean it because they are that way. And why are they that way? Why are they more generous than we are? When we moved to England, it was like going to the land of the barbarians from civilization. And everyone looks and thinks the Islamic world, barbarians. It's just the media's done it to everybody, but it's not the way it is.
What's your concept of God today?
It's the ground of all being.
Do you feel like you rely upon God?
I cannot imagine how one could live the difficult lives we live without that. Because it gets...
Do you remember when that light turned on for you?
Yeah.
Do you feel like was there an event where you realized this for the first time?
Well, one of the most memorable ones is I was here in Louisville, and I was going to go to Egypt for Christmas, out to take some grandchildren some presents and stuff. And my husband took me to out to Stanford Field. Is that what it's called? And I was all these hand luggage packages, and I was in line, and the flight was going to go Louisville, Cincinnati to JFK, and then the flight to Egypt. And I was standing in line. There were a couple of people from New York right in front of me, and I could hear this. The check-in person said, "Well, sorry to tell you, but the flight from Louisville to Cincinnati has been canceled." And they said, "Well, we don't care. You route us anyway to get us to New York." She said, "Well, actually, there is no way I can do that tonight." And they said, "Well, we're New Yorkers. We're just down for the day. We don't even have toothbrushes." They said, "Well, now this Cincinnati, is that far away?" She said, "Do we have time to drive and make that flight?" She said, "Well, actually, you do." So they turned to me and they said, "Are you doing this?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "We are New Yorkers. We don't drive. We will rent a car if you drive it, right?" And I thought, all right, because it's sort of anticlimactic to go back home and I can do the same flight tomorrow. So we got in the car and we got out to where 71 goes out, and I saw 90 miles to Cincinnati, and the flight was leaving in 2 hours. And I'm not that mathematical, but I figured if I don't drive 90 miles an hour and there's not a half an hour at the other end, there's no chance. So the people are texting in the back seat, and I calmly put the pedal up to 90, very calmly. And I don't drive like that, but I had an unusual calm, and I thought if I get picked up, well, I'll pay the fine. Screeched into the airport. They jumped out and ran for it. I gave $20 to the guy and said, "Return the car," which you don't do, and rushed in with my stuff because I had to check in, and I got to the check-in counter. And the lady said, "I'm sorry, but it's too late for you to make this flight." So I said, "Oh, but I have to." I didn't have to. So then I let Neville know, well, I'm going to do that. I'm here. I'll just get a hold. Tomorrow I'll take the same flight. It'll go ahead. It's all fine. Then she said, "Oh, miss, actually, that flight leaving for New York was delayed, so we can put you on it, and we can still get your bags transferred to Egypt." So I got on, and there was that couple that had abandoned me. And they said, "Look, we're sorry. When we get to New York, JFK is a huge circle, terminals all the way around. We have a limo, and we'll take you to your terminal," which they did. I got out with my hand luggage, and it was dark, my terminal, but I know where the gate is, So I started running the kind of running where it's about to crack your lungs, it's burning. But I ran as fast as I could and got to where the little check-in thing is. There was no one there, and I went down the chute to the plane, and at the bottom, they just pull the wheelchairs and they're trying to pull the door shut. And I said, "I'm on that flight." And they said, "Actually, you can't get on." I said, "Yeah, but my baggage is on there." It had made it. So they let me on, and I flew. And I was sitting with my daughter the next afternoon, and Neville called me. He'd been to church that morning. And they said, didn't Gray fly today or whenever it was to Egypt? And Neville said, yes. They said, oh, well, that flight, the Egypt Air, went into the water. The flight I would have taken the next day. So, in other words, if I hadn't driven 90 miles an hour, if that flight hadn't been delayed, if they didn't have a limousine, and I hadn't run to the nth, 2 seconds later, I would be dead. So I was drawn to that. I didn't know why I was driving like that. I didn't know why I was running like that. I was running to save my life because it wasn't my time.
Do you recall a time doubting your faith? Like a time where...
Oh, I think lots. I mean, sometimes you just wonder, are these just a bunch of doctrines, that we're being fed? But then, when I teach art history to a bunch of kids that don't believe in anything, and they see the beauty of Borobudur or Chartres Cathedral, and does beauty come from a lie? And then you can say, isn't it interesting that the people, that the Shakespeares, the Tolstoys, everything you're taught in school is great? Isn't it interesting then all of them believe this stuff? Better take a chance with it,
I like asking people, what are they most grateful for?
Well, to be honest, this morning I was grateful for movement, because in '88 I was paralyzed. I was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig, ALS, but it turned out to be Guillain-Barré, which knocks out your muscle and nerve system with great pain. And I was in England, and I made it to here, and I never expected to move again. I couldn't chew, and I could suck. I sucked Kroger's, custard milk or something, and they got me back to England and gave up on me. My children were in school there. And so I couldn't, the worst part of it is not to be able to shift position in bed, to never be able to scratch. And and I became conscious of other people who were moving and talking and caring, and people getting angry over things. It's like, if they had any idea, they're moving without pain. And when it finally went, I was giving a lecture because I'm a lecturer, and the subject was how illness and suffering are actually blessings, because they are an opening for purification. And what we've been talking about today completely is the purification of this tainted packaging, right? And when I was doing this talk on this subject, because I could talk even though I couldn't do anything like chew, I could only move my eyes like this, I couldn't turn my head. I was in a wheelchair. And I realized that here I was like a stick in a river going by. And I never complained about this illness, because you're taught, don't complain. This is what's been given to you. But I never praised God for it. I never loved it. And I was like this, and I was in the middle of the talk, and I suddenly realized, I thought of all those people in the Islamic world, when they get the news, your baby is dead, your leg is going to be taken off, and they praise God. And I just thought, they were being given opportunities to purify. And I've been given, for me, the biggest one, because I'm very active, I move a lot, I'm back to back, I never sit down, and Everything was taken from me. All my energy was gone, which I must be addicted to. All my movement was gone. My whole life was gone, right? It was like being Job, but not as bad, because I didn't have boils and I didn't have all my family dead. But it was like that. And all of a sudden, I thought to myself, God honored me. He thought I was up to this level of a trial of purification. And at that moment, I loved his will, and the fingers started to move. They started to come undone. And it means that when we get bad news, instead of being upset, we don't know what it's about. We think we do, but we don't. You have to flow and love his will in you. And that's what you're seeing the Palestinians doing right now in Gaza. That's why it's unreal. So before I reached that stage, and I remember as it was coming undone, I was back in Cambridge. Sometimes at night I'd feel it coming back, and I'd think, oh no. And then I realized, don't think, oh no. Think, oh yes. And when you would flow with what you've been given, you flow with it, you know? You're not like this. When the paralysis hit totally, I was upstairs in my childhood bedroom before being taken back to England. And that night when it happened, I was lying in the bedroom upstairs, and moonlight was coming through the branches all over the bed. And I entitled the article that I wrote about this called, Even at Night, the Sun is There. Even in death, life is there. And I was looking at that, and all of a sudden, the body went so rigid, I was like a log, and I felt something lifting up out of me. And I looked back and I thought, this is unbelievable. My head is on the pillow, and I'm thinking. And I looked out in the hallway and I thought, thank God I'm not in a hospital, right? It'd be horrible. And then I clunked back. I sort of made my peace with death. And there I was, paralyzed until the morning when my parents found me and the whole process began. But during that night, I didn't know whether I was going to live. But I thought, if I end up in a wheelchair, like people won't come and talk to me, they'll be afraid at a party of getting stuck and not being able to get away. Like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? All right? And then I realized, no, I thought about people I really admired, my mentors spiritually. They didn't do anything. They were. And I thought of this woman in Egypt, Dr. Zahir Abdin, a great Egyptian, aristocrat, doctor, gave her life from 5 a.m. till midnight out, started hospitals all over the world, even in Russia. And she was always available for anyone, even a waif in the street. And she never spoke badly about anyone. And she was like luminous. And what did I love about her? Not that she was a doctor. I loved her state of being. So I thought, if she did that much for me, what I can do with the rest of my life in my wheelchair, if I live, is try to be like that. Because then you're doing more than you're ever doing if you're like serving sandwiches somewhere. Not that that isn't important. You have to do that too. She was a doctor, after all, right?
What's your greatest wish?
Oh, to be like her. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that was a big wake-up call right there. I saw again. And see, the problem is that we keep having these experiences, and then we still lead waste of life. I remember once I pulled out on a highway in England, the M11, off a B road. And because I'd just come from America, I looked the wrong direction. And I pressed on the pedal and I shot out, and I realized I'm dead. And I had my last thought, and I know what it is. And then when I looked up the highway the right way, and there were no cars coming, I fell over the steering wheel and sobbed, because my last thought was, I should have given everything. And I realized, even knowing my last thought, I'm still keeping for myself.
Do you have a message?
I think I've said the message. The message is try to remember to meet every person you meet. Try to remember, practice a few times till it becomes second nature, to let the heart consider, right? Even before you speak. Let the heart be in front of the tongue. The tongue will slip and say anything. Let the heart really speak to that person, like who's come into your space. You have a divine presence in front of you. And if you treat them like that, it'll remind them of who they are.